Cleopatra was born into a world already on fire. Egypt, once the undisputed jewel of the ancient world, had become a client state in all but name. Her dynasty, the Ptolemies, had ruled for nearly 300 years, descendants of Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy I. But they were Greek in blood, foreign to the native Egyptians, and increasingly detached from the realities of governance. The Ptolemaic court was infamous for incestuous marriages, palace coups, and civil wars. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy the Pharaoh, was known as Auletes, the flute player, more interested in music and Roman bribes than in ruling. To stay on the throne, he plunged Egypt into debt to Roman bankers and bribed the Senate. Egypt became a pawn in Rome's growing empire, valuable only for its grain, gold, and Nile trade routes. By the time Cleopatra ascended to the throne, Egypt was a fractured and bleeding land, rich in culture but politically bankrupt. Cleopatra became queen at just 18, ruling alongside her younger brother Ptolemy III. But unlike the passive queens before her, she asserted herself immediately, dropping her brother's name from official decrees, appearing alone on coinage, and even engaging in foreign policy independently. This move defied tradition. Women in Egypt could rule, but rarely with such bold authority. Her advisors turned against her. By 49 BCE, she was overthrown and exiled. But Cleopatra did not vanish. She raised an army in Syria and prepared for war. Then Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria. He had pursued Pompey, his rival in Rome's civil war, only to find him murdered by Ptolemy III. Egypt's internal chaos was now a Roman issue. Cleopatra saw her opening and made the most daring move of her life. Smuggled into Caesar's presence, she used not seduction, but strategy, aligning herself with Caesar's interests. The result? A Roman-backed civil war and her triumphant return to the throne. Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar wasn't just personal, it was profoundly political. She bore him a son, Caesarion, and secured her rule over Egypt. But more than that, she ensured Egypt's continued semi-autonomy in an increasingly Roman world. In a symbolic move, Caesar placed a golden statue of her in the Temple of Venus Genitrix in Rome, a powerful, if controversial, gesture. But their relationship scandalized Roman elites. Cleopatra was seen as a foreign queen interfering in Roman affairs. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's safety and that of her son was again in jeopardy. She returned to Egypt and began fortifying her position, awaiting the next power to rise from the Roman ashes. Why did Rome care so much about Egypt? Two reasons: grain and gold. Egypt was Rome's breadbasket. Without its annual grain shipments, Rome risked famine and revolt. Cleopatra controlled the flow of food to Rome, a power few truly understood. Additionally, Egypt's mines, papyrus trade, and taxes were economically critical. Cleopatra used this wealth with precision. She funded public works, maintained Alexandria's cultural prominence, and, perhaps most importantly, kept Rome's generals indebted to her. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra was summoned by Mark Antony to Tarsus in Cilicia. But this wasn't a trial. It was a test. Antony, newly powerful and in charge of Rome's eastern provinces, needed allies and money. Cleopatra had both. Their meeting was masterful diplomacy. Cleopatra arrived in regal splendor, dressed as Isis, sailing on a golden barge down the Cydnus River. It wasn't vanity, it was branding. She aligned herself with divine power and feminine authority, a move designed to impress and intimidate. Their alliance, like the one with Caesar, soon turned romantic, but more importantly, it was strategic. They shared enemies, goals, and children. Cleopatra gave birth to twins, then another son, but she also gained political concessions: Cyprus, parts of Syria, and much of the eastern Mediterranean. But back in Rome, a rival was rising: Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. He had no love for Cleopatra and no tolerance for Antony's eastern ambitions. Octavian's genius was in propaganda. He painted Antony as a traitor, bewitched by a foreign queen, abandoning Roman values for Egyptian luxury. The donations of Alexandria, where Antony publicly gave Roman provinces to Cleopatra's children, gave Octavian all the ammunition he needed. He portrayed Caesarion as a false heir and Cleopatra as a threat to Roman sovereignty. In 32 BCE, war was declared, officially on Cleopatra, not Antony, a calculated move that unified Rome against a foreign enemy. The decisive moment came in 31 BCE at the naval battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's combined forces were strong, but disorganized and outmaneuvered. Cleopatra, seeing the tide turn, fled with her fleet, and Antony followed. Some see this as cowardice, but others argue it was a strategic retreat, meant to preserve Egypt's power for a land war. Regardless, morale crumbled. Antony's legions deserted. Octavian pressed on. A year later, he entered Alexandria. Facing capture, Antony committed suicide. Cleopatra, after negotiating and failing to protect her children and legacy, took her own life. Cleopatra's death marked not just the end of a life, but the end of an era. Egypt was annexed into the Roman Empire. Caesarion was captured and executed. Her other children by Antony were taken to Rome and raised by Octavia, Antony's former wife. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, used Cleopatra's downfall as a final justification for the birth of the Roman Empire. He paraded her image through triumphs, but never her body. Cleopatra was erased from official history, her achievements twisted into tales of vanity and lust. Cleopatra's story has been told by her enemies. The Roman lens portrayed her as a cautionary tale, a woman who dared too much, loved too deeply, and ruled too boldly. But modern historians are piecing together another picture. A polyglot queen who spoke 9 languages. A ruler who stabilized her economy, strengthened her borders, and defended her kingdom against the most powerful empire on earth. A woman who used every tool available, intellect, diplomacy, wealth, and yes, charisma, to protect her people. Cleopatra was not the end of Egypt, she was its final defense. And for a moment in time, she stood alone against the world. Subscribe for more historical facts.